Et on va commencer tout de suite avec Carolina KLINT. Carolina KLINT est une femme d'influence, comme on dit. Elle est régulièrement très haut placée dans les classements des femmes les plus influentes en Europe ou dans le monde sur les questions du risque. Elle est habituée à sillonner le monde pour essayer de transporter la bonne parole. Elle est une habituée de Davos où elle rencontre du Global Risk Report. Et nous avons vraiment la chance de la voir aujourd'hui avec nous pour qu'elle nous explique un petit peu ce qu'il faut voir de l'évolution du risque et comment est-ce que la perception du risque a changé. Je vous demande d'accueillir Carolina KLINT. Ravi de vous accueillir, Carolina. Nice to meet you. Carolina va s'exprimer en anglais comme il est de règle à Davos et ailleurs, n'est-ce pas? So you're Managing Director Risk for Marsh.
Yes.
And a specialist for Global Risk Report in Davos and everywhere in the world. So let us explain what is now the new perception of the risk, because the perception of the risk has changed. How and why?
Over time, it has definitely changed. And what a beautiful view, by the way, to be in an auditorium full of risk professionals to talk about risk and resilience. This is wonderful. So the perception of risk has changed over time in the way that risk is more interconnected and more complex today than it's ever been. In previous years, the business environment has been predictable. And that is not the case anymore. It is unpredictable. It is really difficult to navigate business in this environment. And that is really my pitch today. And I guess I can move into my little speech.
Yes, please.
Yes. I have a little bit of a fashion moment here with my earring. I'm sorry about that. So this is terrible, but I'm going to take it off.
Okay. Do you need help?
Bear with me. No, it's okay. If you can watch it for me. Thank you.
It's
this
very
is
precious.
Good risk management, right?
Yes, it's very precious. If you give me the other one, I can risk to sell it.
Yes. No, well, okay, we can talk about it later.
Okay.
It's quite expensive, in fact. So it is such a pleasure and privilege to be here, and thank you to Oliver and to AMRAE for this opportunity to set the stage a little bit. And what I want to do today is talk to you about the Global Risk Report. And the Global Risk Report is one of those marquee publications for anyone who's interested in risk and resilience. And what I think is so beautiful about the Global Risk Report, which, by the way, is produced by the World Economic Forum every year. It's the 20th year of production this year. And it really informs the agenda of the Davos meeting. But it's not written for a risk audience. It's written for world leaders. It's written for the C-suite, for board members. And what that helps us as risk professionals do is elevate the topic of risk, elevate the discussion to where it belongs, because it does belong on the agenda of boards, of executive management teams. The Global Risk Report is underpinned by a survey that is sent out the year before it's produced. So the publication this year was released on the 15th of January, and the Global Risks Perception Survey was sent out to 900 experts that represents academia, business, NGOs, public, private, governments, everything under the sun, to give perspectives on what is perceived as the risks that we need to keep track of. It's sent out in September, October, and that's important to remember when we look at the results of the report. There's one other survey that underpins the report, and it's called the Executive Opinion Survey. It's sent out to 11,000 executives and provides perspectives on the business risks to conducting business in a specific country. So it's a very geographical view, which is very helpful if you're looking to expand in a geography that is new to you. You can take a look at how that business environment is. This year, the report is divided into two main chapters. A world of growing divisions that speaks to state-based armed conflict. It speaks to extreme weather events. Last year, the second chapter was called At the Tipping Point. This year, unfortunately, it's called The Point of No Return. So apparently, we have passed the tipping point now, so it's quite depressing. Throughout the report, there are reflections and recommendations on how to increase collaboration. Because the world is at a point now where not one single stakeholder can solve the issues at hand alone. We need to find platforms for collaboration. We need to solve these systemic risks in a much more collaborative way. I'm going to take you down a little walk down memory lane, and this is a very busy slide, and I can imagine if you're sitting up there, it's impossible to see. So I will guide you. We'll walk through this page alone, a lot of colorful boxes. So the first thing, the colors. Blue represents economic risk, green environmental risk, yellow, orange, geopolitical risk, red, societal risk, and purple, technological risk. What you're looking at is the evolution of top risk concerns over time. So it's from 2011 all the way to 2024, so the results of last year. We don't see this year's results here. So if we take a look at this, we can conclude just by looking at the colors that in the years following the financial crisis, economic risks was very, very prevalent. Lots of blue boxes. As we move closer to this day, it becomes increasingly green, so much more focus on the environmental risks. You see an orange lingering in the mid-rankings, and then all of a sudden in 17, 18, and 19, WMDs, which is the terrifying short abbreviation for weapons of mass destruction. Why is it that all of a sudden in 17, 18, and 19, it was a top-ranked risk across the world? Two main reasons. The North Korea crisis in 2016, when North Korea suddenly had the ability to launch ballistic missiles far beyond any reach that anyone could have expected. And the second reason is that Trump launched his America First platform, and that created a lot of stress in the geopolitical arena. So that is the reason why we see WMDs ranked top for a number of years. We see a little purple box in 2014. All of a sudden, digital was a little bit stressed. And it's fascinating, I find, that we don't see in the purple boxes. I mean, look here, 19, 20, 21. It's not as if we're less dependent on technology, right? Everything is interconnected, and we're all part of a big ecosystem. But in 14, there was a little bit of a concern, ranked as number 5. But why? You remember in media, it was reports about this Internet of Things? Everything's connected, apparently. That is the reason we see the little purple box. And then, fast forward, 2024, last year, 2 purple boxes. All of a sudden, we had misinformation, disinformation, and cyber insecurity ranked as 1 and 4, respectively. 2021, top-ranked risk, infectious diseases. No question mark on that, of course. COVID-19 hit us all. Interesting to note, it's not anywhere to be found except, look, 2015 ranked as number 2. Why? What I usually get is it bird flu? Is it SARS? But it's not. It's the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, in fact. Now, it didn't turn into a pandemic. It was well contained. But it's interesting to note that as soon as it's well contained, it slips off the risk landscape, and we don't really keep it in mind at all. You see 2023, geo-economic confrontation, so the world was more concerned about the economic impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. 2024, all of a sudden, it's more interstate armed conflict, so more concern about the hot war situation and more hot conflicts flaring up in different parts of the world. So what do we learn by looking at this map here? Well, one of the learnings is that human beings are wired to look at what is exactly right in front of us. And we have to fight this. We have to fight it by forcing ourselves to be a little bit more long-term, to strike the balance between the short-term and the long-term horizon on risk. So we're going to take a quick look at the results for this year's report. I should say misinformation and disinformation last year. The reason why it was top-ranked is because the proliferation of artificial intelligence. You remember ChatGPT was all of a sudden available to everyone. And artificial intelligence, the ability of synthetic content being produced at a great pace, but also the spread, could sway voters. We had a lot of large economies that went to the polls last year, and to some degree this year. This is why misinformation and disinformation is top-ranked. As you will see, misinformation and disinformation continues to be top-ranked for this year, looking at the 2-year short-term risk perspective. So you see it's divided into near-term, 2 years, and longer-term, 10 years. So the short-term perspective here gives misinformation and disinformation as the top-ranked risk again. Now, the reason is slightly different. It's not necessarily so much connected to the elections, but it's much more connected to the risk of private companies suffering in the hybrid warfare between states. So imagine a scenario where a state-sponsored cyber attack, misinformation campaign on a private brand in another rivaling country is there only to bring down the value of the brand, to bring it down in order to support domestic production. And I think this is a scenario that feels a bit new to us. It's something that we need to prepare for and really understand that this is a risk of something that could, in fact, play out. Number 2, extreme weather events. Now, this is very interesting. It is very recent that we're starting to see extreme weather events make their way into the short-term view on risk. In previous years, historically, we've always pushed out concerns about the weather, about climate change, to the future. We know that it's there, but we're not really ready to do something about it. So what we see now reflected is that the respondents feel that this is in fact something that is starting to impact us. Everyone knows of someone that had a flooded house or a flood that impacted a factory or a hailstorm where we're not expecting a hailstorm. State-based armed conflict, and you see number 9, geo-economic confrontation. So now we have both hot conflict and the economic consequences of war. Looking longer term, it is green, 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 and 2 purple, 3 purple categories. So digital is much more front and center in the longer term, but it also tells us the respondents feel that we don't really have the mechanisms to solve these big issues and risks that is facing the world. So the fact that we have extreme weather events, biodiversity loss, critical change to our systems, natural resource shortages ranked from 1 to 4, it is quite concerning, and we need to start working together to solve some of these big threats. The global risk landscape today is like staring down into a bowl of spaghetti. So this is the map of how risks are interconnected, and what is interesting to note is that when you start looking at how risks are impacting each other, accelerating one another, exacerbating one another, it is actually not the same risks that you saw on the previous list. So all of a sudden, inequality will bubble up. And you see how it's connected with decline in health and well-being, how it's connected to geo-economic confrontation. This is a page that you can spend a lot of time reflecting on and thinking about. And the real value here is taking this and applying it to your own businesses, your day-to-day. Look at it and think, what are the risks that you are faced with? And how do they interconnect with risks in that map that you're developing? And in this day and age, this is absolutely critical because we are all part of an ecosystem and risks are interlinked in a way that hasn't been the case before. So I talked about the executive opinion survey. You know that on the global risk perception survey, there was no blue categories. There was no concern about the economy, which is in fact quite naive, and I'll come back to that in a second. But looking at the executive opinion survey and looking at what executives view as the main risks, the global aggregated view, look at that, top 3 categories, it's all about the economy. So we have economic downturn, inflation, and labor and/or talent shortage up there. Very interesting. Why is it that we have a difference here? My theory is that executives are very much caught in the quarterly capitalism. They're very much focused on the economic output, like what is the consequence of the risk that we're facing. But in fact, maybe don't take the time to think about the root cause. Why do we have a risk of an economic downturn? Why could we potentially trigger inflation? And I think this is the beauty of really comparing and contrasting, thinking about the discussions that happen in the boardroom, the discussions that happen in the executive committees, and contrasting this with the knowledge that you all have, the knowledge of the risks that face us, what is coming towards us on the risk horizon, and really connect the two. We see extreme weather events. Again, this is historically not something which has concerned executives in this report. All of a sudden, it's up there. All of a sudden, the recognition is there. This is something that is starting to impact our results and the businesses. AI and cyber risk. I talked a little bit about misinformation and disinformation. About this time last year, we had a new type of cyber attack evolve and hit the world. There was a man at the finance department in a Hong Kong-based company, and you may have read about this in the news, the poor guy. He received an email from his UK-based CFO asking him to wire transfer $25 million to an offshore account. Secret project, of course. Not much detail, but it was urgent, urgent, urgent. And he read the email and he said, I've seen this before. It's a phishing attempt. Of course, I'm not going to take any action on this. But then he received an invitation to a video conference call. And he was on this call together with the UK-based CFO, with other members of the team that he's worked with for a long time and that he knows well. And they went through the rationale. Why was this important? What was behind this transaction? Everything seemed legit. So he wire transferred the $25 million, and it turned out he wasn't talking to his team members at all. He was talking to AI-created avatars. It was a deep fake claim. What this teaches us is that we're operating in a very different environment. And it's not only upon us to make sure that we upskill our employees to walk into their daily business with this kind of mindset that this could potentially happen. But it's also important for you, for us as individuals. Imagine you get a Teams call or a WhatsApp call or a FaceTime call from a member of your family. And you're speaking to the person. It's something urgent, you need to help them. But in fact, it could be synthetically produced avatars. So it's just something to keep in mind and think about what does this mean in terms of consequences. So what do we need to do differently? Supply chains, huge topic. So supply chains has been in distress. It's not recent, right? I mean, if we think about it, it started with the US-China trade war back in 2018, 2019. And then COVID hit. I spoke to lots of clients that wanted to reduce their dependency on Chinese ports, and instead they put their goods on container trains across Russia. Well, that turned out to be a really bad idea, because then Russia invaded Ukraine on the 24th of February, 22. And it's been one blow after another to supply chains. I mean, last year we saw Houthi rebels attack container ships in the Red Sea. The Suez Canal became very compromised. And at the same time, on the other side of the world, because of lack of rainfall, the Panama Canal was compromised and couldn't really be used. Capacity was severely reduced. So what we have here is an example of risks being layered on top of one another. And we had really a crunch for two of the main waterways when it comes to global trade in the world. So what is happening now is that we're seeing the geopolitical landscape, the narrative around self-sufficiency, about nationalism, is impacting this as well. Because on top of all these challenges, we also have a regulatory labyrinth to manage, with increased sanctions, with rules, with trade restrictions, with trade barriers. And we basically have a trade war ahead of us. So in this environment, of course, it is critical to strike the balance between that just-in-time strategy or the just-in-case strategy. Because in previous years, it's been enough, in fact, to rely on your suppliers because you know they're going to deliver. And all of a sudden, having a geographical dependency on suppliers or having accumulated risk around a specific geographic area, it's not good enough anymore. So a lot of food for thought here. So are companies generally ready to deal with this? Are companies actually taking this seriously? Well, I would say generally, yes. It's just that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. It's my favorite quote by Mike Tyson. I never thought I would quote Mike Tyson talking about risk and resilience, but it's true. And the environment today gives us so many opportunities to get punched in the face. So what you prepare for, the risks that you put in your risk register, is very unlikely the things that are actually going to end up hitting you. So what does that mean? Well, in fact, it's okay, because if you work on building resilience, if you work on strengthening that muscle, if you have a strong culture in your organization, it doesn't matter that much, because whatever hits you, you will be stronger. So a couple of things, great opportunities. Well, first of all, thank yourself for choosing the right industry. Risk professionals have never been more relevant. We have so much value and so much relevance to offer, and I think it's something that we should take a lot of pride in. But it's important to take a longer-term view on risk, to really force yourself to balance the short-term and the long-term. Take a very holistic perspective on risk. Diversity, around the table when talking about risk. It is absolutely critical. It's always critical, but it's never been more critical. I have clients that invite a shadow committee of young talents, and they basically give the risk committee prep work to this shadow committee to just pressure test some ideas and get some new input. Pretty interesting, right? But also invite other people that don't take the same people that sat around the table last year. Invite someone new to look at the risk landscape and what could potentially hit you. Identify opportunities to collaborate. And I don't only mean within the company, because this is something where I see an opportunity for improvement as well. Within the company, to connect the dots between HR, between legal, between the risk function, between all of the different business areas, work together, but also look at opportunities to collaborate outside of your company, because we need to come together. And then, of course, evaluate organizational agility, empower leaders and employees to take decisions even if information is scarce and maybe something dramatic has happened to the company, and connect people, risk, and strategy. So I am always happy to discuss. You can find me on LinkedIn if you want the slides. I also want to recommend, if you want to deep dive into the French perspectives of this report and talk about what does this mean for France, what does it mean for French companies, we strongly recommend that you reach out to our excellent Marsh McLennan CEO, Fabrice Domange. He's quite tall, difficult to miss, and his fantastic team, of course. And with that, Nicolas, let's have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karolina. Maybe a few questions. So if there is only one thing that they in the room, the risk managers, has to keep in mind after listening to your keynote, what is the point?
So I think one of the important things to reflect on is what we need to do in terms of upskilling ourselves, right? And I think one of the things where we haven't spent enough time is working on our communication skills. So how do we create a compelling narrative? How do we create a storyline that is tailored for the audience so that we can elevate these questions and really put them where they belong on the agenda of senior stakeholders?
At the end of the keynote, you were talking about France. Do you think that there is a different sensation or a different way of judging the risk between, for instance, the American delegation you can meet in Davos and the European delegation you can have here in the room?
You know, it's a great question, because I do sense that what came out of Davos was, in fact, an American delegation that was quite bullish, quite optimistic, very much this is our time, the economy is strong, it's going to be good. And the European delegation, on the other hand, was really deflated. And I think part of it is that we're regulating ourselves to death in this part of the world. And I think about it because there's a lot we have to be proud of in Europe. There's so much that we can achieve. And one of the great examples is actually here in France, when Macron decided that, you know what, we're going to remove all the red tape to rebuild the Notre Dame. You know what, it's fine. Like, don't even care about the regulations. I give you a free card. And all of a sudden, this amazing cathedral is rebuilt in 5 years. So we can do it. It's just that we have to be a little bit more flexible.
Okay, I have a very simple question, a last one. Do you want that I give you back your pearl?
I would really appreciate it, and I thank you for watching it.
Oh, okay, I will do it. Thank you, Karolina.
Thank you.